Welcome to Land of Horror, where horror stories come to life like never before. In today's video, we will explore chilling true events, unsolved mysteries, and the fears lurking in the shadows. From bone-chilling murder cases to supernatural phenomena that defy all explanation, each story will take you on a journey filled with tension and suspense. You will hear about real individuals who have faced terrifying moments, life and death situations, and discoveries that send chills down anyone's spine. Prepare yourself for moments of anxiety and thrills, because these stories aren't just fiction, but the dark truths of life. Don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on notifications to join us in uncovering even more horrifying mysteries.
Danielle Harkins had always been the kind of teacher who inspired her students. With her long chestnut hair often pulled back in a neat bun and her bright blue eyes radiating warmth, she had a gift for engaging even the most reluctant learners. But as the summer of 2012 approached, a shadow began to cloud her once vibrant spirit. Friends noted her absence from school functions, her laughter replaced by an unsettling silence. In the weeks leading up to the incident, her demeanor shifted dramatically. Where once she was enthusiastic, her eyes now held a distant, haunted look. She spoke less in the teacher's lounge, her once gregarious nature now replaced with an air of secrecy. Her colleagues attributed it to personal troubles, unaware that something far darker was taking root within her mind. As the days turned into weeks, Danielle's behavior became increasingly bizarre. Her house, once the site of gatherings filled with laughter and music, had become a fortress of solitude. Neighbors reported seeing her wandering the yard late at night, clutching strange symbols she had drawn in chalk on the sidewalk, her eyes wide and unfocused. The unsettling change did not go unnoticed by Mrs. Johnson, who lived next door. A retired nurse, Mrs. Johnson had always prided herself on being observant, and she found herself growing more concerned with each passing day. Late-night conversations with her husband revolved around their increasingly bizarre neighbor. "Something isn't right," she would murmur, peering through her curtains, her heart racing as Danielle's figure flickered in the shadows. Word of Danielle's strange behavior spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. It started with whispers during morning jogs, then escalated to hushed discussions at the local coffee shop. Mrs. Johnson, fueled by a mix of curiosity and concern, decided to confront Danielle one evening. After knocking on her door, she was met with an unsettling silence before Danielle finally answered, her expression unreadable. "Danielle, I've been worried about you," Mrs. Johnson said, forcing a smile. "Is everything okay?" Danielle's gaze flickered, momentarily revealing a hint of the warmth that once defined her. "I'm just exploring new ideas, Mrs. Johnson. Nothing to worry about." But as she spoke, a chill ran down Mrs. Johnson's spine, as if something unholy lay just beneath the surface. Weeks passed, and Danielle became consumed with her research. She pored over ancient texts, books filled with dark rituals and practices that would make any rational person cringe. Her living room transformed into a chaotic sanctuary, candles flickering ominously, strange artifacts scattered across the floor. Every night, she would read aloud to herself, her voice a soft whisper that echoed through the empty halls. The air grew thick with an energy that seemed to pulse in tandem with her increasing obsession. Neighbors began to notice the pungent smell of burnt herbs wafting from her home, mingling with the damp scent of the Florida evening. Mrs. Johnson, unable to shake the feeling of dread, watched helplessly as the woman she once admired sank deeper into her abyss. It was a warm Saturday evening when Danielle's ritual reached its apex. She had invited 7 of her students, teenagers who had always shown interest in the mysterious, to her home under the guise of a summer gathering. The teens, lured by a mix of curiosity and the promise of adventure, arrived with a mix of excitement and apprehension. As they gathered around the small fire at the pier, the setting sun cast a crimson hue over the water, painting a haunting backdrop for what was about to unfold. Each teen brought their own burdens, family expectations, school pressures, and the typical turmoil of adolescence, but that evening, they found solace in each other's company, unaware of the true nature of the gathering. The atmosphere grew tense as Danielle began her speech, her voice low and reverberating. "Tonight, we cleanse ourselves," she declared, her arms outstretched, as if welcoming the shadows that danced just beyond the firelight. "Demons lurk in all of us: fear, doubt, guilt. Tonight, we purge them." The teens exchanged uneasy glances. "What does she mean?" whispered one of them, a skeptical boy named Jake, who had been dragged along by his friends. The air was thick with uncertainty, but something in Danielle's tone captivated them. It felt both inviting and terrifying, a siren's call echoing through the night. As the fire crackled, Danielle produced a small, gleaming knife. The flames illuminated her features, casting eerie shadows that twisted and contorted across her face. "We must cut to let the demons out. The pain is necessary," she urged, her voice almost hypnotic. One by one, the teens, driven by a mix of fear and a desperate need for acceptance, took the knife from Danielle's hand. The first cut was a gasp, hesitation, but soon the whispers of encouragement pushed them forward. Blood mingled with the earth as they followed her lead, the ritual spiraling into a macabre dance of desperation and surrender. As the final echoes of the ritual faded into the night, a sense of dread enveloped the group. The intoxicating rush of adrenaline gave way to horror as they looked at one another, the reality of their actions crashing down like a tidal wave. Panic gripped their hearts, and in the silence that followed, the only sound was the crackling of the fire and the distant calls of night creatures. It was then that Jake, shaking with fear, pulled out his phone and texted a friend, detailing the events. The moment was a catalyst, a cry for help that would set off a chain reaction of consequences they could never have anticipated. The police would soon arrive, their flashing lights illuminating the dark secrets that had unfolded at the pier that night, forever changing the lives of everyone involved. This structured approach lays the foundation for an immersive and chilling story that keeps readers engaged throughout. The detailed descriptions and psychological insights into Danielle's character create a compelling narrative, leading into the inevitable consequences of her actions. To achieve the desired 20,000 words, each section can be expanded further with additional character development, dialogues, and sensory details. If you would like to explore specific sections in greater detail or need further expansion on any part, feel free to let me know. As the last embers of the fire glowed in the dark, a heavy silence fell over the group of teenagers. The initial thrill of the ritual had morphed into a suffocating dread that clung to them like a thick fog. They stood in a circle, blood-stained and trembling, each struggling to process what had just transpired. "Did we really just do that?" Jake whispered, his voice barely audible above the sound of the waves crashing against the pier. He glanced around, searching the faces of his friends for reassurance. Instead, he found only fear mirrored back at him. "I didn't think. I thought it was just a stupid game," one girl, Lily, murmured, clutching her arms around herself as if trying to ward off the chill that seemed to seep into her bones. "This isn't right." The reality of the night began to settle heavily on their shoulders, an unbearable weight. Panic surged within Jake as he fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking uncontrollably. He needed to reach out, to tell someone, anyone, what had happened. The piercing sound of sirens shattered the stillness of the night, bright lights illuminating the pier as police vehicles rolled up. The sight of law enforcement officers stepping out sent a jolt of fear through the group. They exchanged nervous glances, the adrenaline from the ritual now replaced by an overwhelming sense of impending doom. "Stay calm," one officer instructed, his voice steady but firm. "We need to talk to each of you individually." As they were escorted to separate areas for questioning, Jake's heart raced. Would they believe him? Would they understand that they had been caught up in something far darker than they ever intended? Each teen was interviewed, and conflicting stories began to emerge. Some insisted it was just a gathering, while others hesitantly admitted to the ritual and the cuts. The officers noted their anxious body language, the way they avoided eye contact, but they also recognized the fear of consequences weighing heavily on them. In the days that followed, the neighborhood erupted in whispers. Residents gathered in small groups, exchanging rumors and speculating about the bizarre event that had unfolded at the pier. The arrival of news vans, equipped with cameras and reporters, only fueled the frenzy. Mrs. Johnson watched with growing concern. She had always prided herself on being the neighborhood's unofficial watchful guardian, and the sight of her once friendly neighbor embroiled in such darkness was devastating. With her hands clasped tightly, she made her way to the community center to discuss the incident. "We need to do something," she urged the gathered residents. "We can't just sit back and let this happen without understanding what led to it. Danielle needs help, and so do those kids." The aftermath of the ritual began to tear apart the friendships that had seemed unbreakable just days before. Jake found himself isolated, unable to face the shame that hung between him and the others. Guilt gnawed at him, constant reminder of the choices he had made that night. "Why did you even go?" Lily confronted him one afternoon, her voice strained. "You could have stopped it." "I didn't think it would go that far," Jake replied, his voice cracking. "I thought it was just a dumb thing to do." But deep down, he knew it had been more than that. The memory of their laughter at the pier was now tainted with blood and fear, a haunting reminder of their collective mistake. Meanwhile, Danielle sat alone in her dimly lit living room, the silence deafening. She replayed the events of that night over and over in her mind, seeking solace in the conviction that she had been chosen to guide these children through a transformative experience. The doubts that had begun to creep in were swiftly brushed aside. "I was helping them," she whispered to herself, clutching the remnants of an ancient text in her hands. They needed to let go of their fears. "I did what I had to do." But even as she spoke the words, a flicker of uncertainty gnawed at her. The police were gathering evidence, and the weight of her actions threatened to crush her. The following days brought a flood of investigators into her home, meticulously combing through her belongings. They discovered journals filled with fragmented thoughts, notes about rituals, and drawings that hinted at a troubled psyche. Each page they turned revealed more about Danielle's descent into obsession. Among the remnants, they uncovered a letter addressed to a mysterious figure from her past, a name that resonated with the darkness she had tried to escape. It painted a picture of a troubled childhood, one filled with trauma and a desperate search for control over her life. The connections began to form, revealing a cycle of pain that had manifested in her actions. Tensions mounted as the teens began to confront each other about what had happened. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken accusations, fear festering like an open wound. Finally, Jake could hold back no longer. "We need to talk about what we did," he shouted during a meeting they held in the park, his voice trembling with rage and regret. "This isn't going away. It's not just gonna disappear because we ignore it." One by one, the group opened up, sharing their fears and regrets. Each confession echoed with raw vulnerability, a testament to the depth of their shared trauma. As Jake poured out his heart, the weight of their secret began to lift, if only slightly. As the investigation drew to a close, the legal ramifications of that night began to surface. Danielle faced charges of child endangerment and assault, while the teenagers were left grappling with the consequences of their involvement. Jake decided to speak out, motivated by a newfound sense of responsibility. In the months that followed, the community slowly began to heal, but the scars remained. The teens attended therapy sessions together, a support group forged in the crucible of their shared trauma. They spoke openly about their experiences, vowing to learn from their mistakes. Danielle, on the other hand, faced her demons alone. Behind bars, she was forced to confront the reality of her actions and the pain she had inflicted on herself and others. In her solitude, she began to write, channeling her feelings onto paper, seeking redemption in a world that felt increasingly foreign. As time went on, the shadows of that fateful night began to fade, but the echoes of fear lingered, reminder of the darkness that can lie within. The community emerged stronger but wiser, forever changed by the events that had unfolded in the shadows of St. Petersburg. Days turned into weeks, but Jake's guilt never waned. Each morning, as the sun rose over St. Petersburg, it cast a stark light on the reality of what had occurred. The faces of his friends haunted him, especially the terrified eyes of the younger boy, Leo, who had hesitated the most during the ritual. Jake couldn't shake the image of the boy's blooded skin, the thin line of fire used to cauterize wounds leaving behind permanent scars. Why didn't I stop it? Jake often whispered to himself in the solitude of his bedroom. He recalled moments leading up to that night, the laughter, the banter, the thrill of doing something cool. Just a game, he had thought. But it was never just a game. In the shadows of his mind, he replayed every second, scrutinizing his own decisions. Would it have changed anything if he had simply refused? The burden of being a bystander felt as heavy as being an active participant, and he found himself spiraling into a dark pit of despair. When school resumed, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Whispers filled the hallways, echoing with rumors that spread like wildfire. "Did you hear? They were at that weird cult thing," students would say, their voices dripping with contempt. Jake walked through the crowded halls with his head down, the weight of shame almost tangible. Friends who once joked with him now looked away, pretending not to see him. Some avoided him altogether, while others expressed their opinions in harsh whispers. The hallways felt narrower, suffocating, as if the walls themselves closed in on him. Lily had become a target of bullying, a once bright personality dimmed by the incident. The whispers followed her, isolating her further. It was painful to watch his friends crumble under the weight of public scrutiny. "Do you think we'll ever be able to move on from this?" Jake asked Lily one afternoon as they sat together on a bench outside. "Who knows?" she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just want it to be over. It feels like a nightmare that won't end." As the trial approached, Danielle Hawkins sat in a sterile courtroom, her heart racing with anxiety. She wore a somber expression, but inside, a storm brewed. Her defense attorney, a stern-looking man named Mr. Thompson, paced beside her, occasionally glancing at her with a mix of concern and frustration. "We need to prepare your defense, Danielle," he urged. "You have to explain why you believe this was necessary." Danielle nodded, but deep down, she struggled to articulate her motives. "I thought I was helping them," she whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of her own doubt. "They were lost. I just wanted to free them." But as the days wore on, the reality of her actions began to weigh heavily. During breaks in the trial, she would often sit alone in her cell, tears streaming down her cheeks. The faces of the teenagers haunted her, especially Jake, who had shown such promise. Had she ruined their lives forever? The media frenzy surrounding the trial only intensified. Local news stations broadcast live updates, painting Danielle as a villain while simultaneously portraying her as a misunderstood figure in desperate need of help. "Teacher or monster," the headlines blared, fueling the community's divided opinion. Some residents rallied in support of Danielle, arguing that she was a victim of circumstance, while others called for her to be punished to the fullest extent of the law. Mrs. Johnson organized community meetings to discuss the ramifications of the incident. "We can't let fear dictate our community," she urged the gathered residents. "We need to support our children, not cast them aside." Yet, as the discussions progressed, it became evident that fear had already taken root. Parents began pulling their children from extracurricular activities, and the atmosphere in St. Petersburg shifted. At home, Jake's internal turmoil only deepened. He struggled to keep the events of that night from his family, but his silence began to eat away at him. His parents noticed his distant demeanor, exchanging worried glances over dinner. "Jake, is everything all right? You seem off lately," his mother asked one evening, concern etched on her face. "I'm fine, Mom," he lied, forcing a smile. But inside, he felt anything but fine. The pressure of keeping the secret felt like a noose tightening around his throat, and the weight of it grew heavier by the day. In moments of solitude, he often reflected on his choices. The walls of his room felt like they were closing in, a constant reminder of the burden he carried. The darkness that had invaded his mind became a companion, whispering doubts that he couldn't shake. Unable to bear the strain any longer, Jake made the difficult decision to seek therapy. He had heard about a local therapist who specialized in helping teens cope with trauma. With a heavy heart, he dialed the number and set up an appointment. During his first session, Jake sat across from Dr. Stevens, a kind-faced woman with gentle eyes. "Tell me about what's been going on," she encouraged, her tone warm and inviting. As Jake opened up about the events of that night, the words spilled out in a torrent. "I didn't want to go, but I felt like I had to. I wanted to fit in," he confessed, his voice trembling. "But now I can't shake the guilt. I feel like I ruined everything." Dr. Stevens listened intently, guiding him through his feelings of shame and responsibility. "It's important to understand that you're not alone in this," she reminded him. "Many people struggle with similar feelings after a traumatic event." The day of the trial arrived, and the tension in the courtroom was palpable. Jake sat in the back, heart racing as he watched Danielle take the stand. The sight of her, once a figure of authority, now reduced to a defendant, struck a chord within him. As the questioning began, Jake felt an overwhelming urge to confront her. When the moment arose, he stood up, his heart pounding in his chest. "I need to say something," he shouted, the words tumbling out before he could stop himself. The courtroom turned silent, as turning towards him. "Jake, no." Lily hissed from her seat, but it was too late. "Why did you do it?" Jake demanded, his voice trembling with emotion. "You could have stopped. You could have helped us in a different way." Danielle's eyes met his, and for a moment, they both saw the pain in each other's hearts. "I thought I was helping you," she replied, tears streaming down her face. "I was lost too. I just wanted to save you." That moment became a pivotal point, not just for them, but for the entire courtroom. In their raw honesty, they found a sliver of understanding, a shared bond forged in trauma. As the trial concluded, the verdict was delivered. Danielle was sentenced to community service and mandatory therapy sessions, a verdict that evoked mixed reactions from the audience. While some believed it was a lenient punishment, others felt it was a chance for healing. Jake walked away from the courthouse, a newfound sense of determination surging through him. The road to recovery would be long and fraught with challenges, but he had taken the first step toward healing. In the months that followed, Jake and his friends began to rebuild their lives. Therapy sessions became a place of solace and support. The weight of guilt still lingered, but they faced it together, understanding that healing was a journey, not a destination. And in the heart of St. Petersburg, the shadows that once loomed heavy began to dissipate, replaced by hope and resilience. The scars of the past would remain, but they became symbols of strength, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, the light could still shine through. In the weeks following the trial, the atmosphere at school shifted yet again. While the initial storm of gossip had calmed, the shadows of the past lingered. Jake, Danielle, and their friends found themselves grappling with an uneasy silence, the bonds they once had now strained under the weight of their shared trauma. At lunchtime, Jake and Lily sat together, their food untouched. "It's so quiet now," Jake remarked, glancing around the cafeteria. "Like everyone is afraid to talk." Lily nodded, her eyes scanning the room. "They're afraid of us, Jake. They see us as broken. It's hard to fit in when everyone's looking at you like you're a monster." The isolation felt suffocating, yet within their small group, there was still a flicker of understanding. They were all navigating their way through the aftermath together, but it was evident that the road ahead would be anything but smooth. Jake's therapy sessions became a lifeline for him. Dr. Stevens guided him through exercises designed to confront his feelings of guilt and trauma. Each week, he unraveled layers of his emotions, slowly beginning to understand that healing wasn't linear. "Tell me about your nightmares," Dr. Stevens prompted one afternoon, her voice calm and steady. Jake hesitated before opening up. "I keep seeing Leo's face," he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "I can't shake the image of him looking so scared." "Nightmares are often our mind's way of processing trauma," Dr. Stevens explained. "It's important to confront those images rather than hide from them." With her guidance, Jake began to visualize confronting Leo, apologizing for not stopping the ritual. The more he practiced, the less the nightmares haunted him. A breakthrough moment arrived when he shared this visualization with his friends, allowing them to see his vulnerability. Danielle's community service assignment took her to a local shelter for homeless families. It was a stark contrast to her life before the incident, but she approached her duties with a heavy heart, hoping to make amends for her past mistakes. One afternoon, as she served lunch to families, she met a mother named Sarah who had 2 young children. Sarah's warmth was infectious, and Danielle felt drawn to her. During their conversation, Danielle learned that Sarah had lost her job due to circumstances beyond her control. "Sometimes life just throws you curveballs," Sarah said with a sad smile. "But we keep pushing forward." Danielle felt a lump in her throat as she realized the depth of her own privilege. She had chosen to enact a ritual out of a desire for power and control, while Sarah was simply trying to survive. This moment marked a turning point for Danielle, as she began to understand the true impact of her actions on others. Despite their attempts to move on, the group continued to struggle with lingering guilt. Jake's nightmares worsened, often leaving him drenched in sweat, heart racing as he relived the night of the ritual. The flashes of blood, screams, and the chaos haunted him, making it difficult to focus in class. Lily, too, experienced the repercussions of their actions. Her grades began to slip as anxiety consumed her thoughts. "I don't think I can keep doing this," she confided to Jake one day after school, her voice shaky. "It's like I'm stuck in a loop of guilt and fear." "Maybe we need to talk to someone," Jake suggested, remembering the success he had found in therapy. "We can't keep carrying this alone." The summer brought an opportunity for the group to reconnect, but old tensions simmered just below the surface. One evening, they gathered at Jake's house for a movie night, hoping to escape reality for a while. However, the atmosphere was tense, filled with unspoken words and resentments. During a quiet moment, Lily finally spoke up. "Can we talk about what happened? I feel like we're just pretending it didn't happen, and it's eating me alive." Jake felt the weight of her words. "We have to face it. We can't pretend we're okay when we're not," he replied, his voice steady. The discussion turned heated as emotions ran high. Accusations flew, revealing fractures in their friendships that had formed since the incident. It took hours, but in that vulnerable space, they began to understand each other's pain, leading to a cathartic release that left them feeling closer than before. While Jake and his friends worked to heal, the community remained divided. Tensions escalated during a public forum organized to discuss the impact of the incident. The atmosphere was charged, with residents expressing their opinions passionately. "This isn't just about the kids. It's about our community's safety," shouted one resident, his voice echoing through the hall. Others chimed in, some in support of Danielle, while others demanded stricter punishments for her actions. The uproar intensified when an outspoken critic, fueled by anger, made threats against those who defended the teenagers. The situation became volatile, and chaos erupted as people stood up, yelling and pointing fingers. Jake and his friends watched from the back, their hearts racing. "This isn't helping anyone," Jake muttered, feeling the weight of the community's rage. As the trial faded from the headlines, Jake found himself thrust into the spotlight unexpectedly. A local news station featured him in a segment about youth trauma, portraying him as a hero for surviving the incident. But Jake felt anything but heroic. "The attention is overwhelming," he admitted to Lily one afternoon. "It's like they're expecting me to be the poster child for overcoming trauma." The pressure began to take its toll on Jake's mental health. He became increasingly anxious, struggling to balance his newfound notoriety with the desire for privacy. The demands of interviews and public appearances drained him, leading to feelings of isolation. "Just because you're in the spotlight doesn't mean you have to shine," Dr. Stevens reminded him during one session. "It's okay to step back and take care of yourself." The crisis point came unexpectedly when one of their friends, Tom, broke down under the pressure. He had remained silent throughout the trials, trying to appear strong, but the weight of the trauma became unbearable. One evening, during a casual hangout, Tom suddenly lashed out, his frustration boiling over. "I can't keep pretending everything's fine." "I'm not fine," he shouted, tears streaming down his face. The group rallied around him, supporting him as he shared the depths of his pain. "I thought I could handle it alone," he admitted, "but I feel so lost." That moment of vulnerability ignited a collective reckoning for the group. They realized that they had been keeping their struggles hidden, afraid to burden each other. In the wake of Tom's crisis, the group sought help from a local mental health organization specializing in trauma recovery. They attended group therapy sessions, where they could share their experiences in a safe environment. As they sat in a circle, each took turns sharing their stories. Jake spoke about his nightmares, Danielle opened up about her guilt, and Lily expressed her fears of never being accepted again. The catharsis was palpable, and for the first time, they felt truly heard. "I didn't realize how much we all needed this," Lily said, wiping away tears. "It's like we've been holding our breath, and now we can finally exhale." The support from the therapist helped them navigate their emotions and develop coping strategies. They learned that healing was a continuous process, and it was okay to ask for help. As the months passed, the group began to rebuild their lives. Jake found solace in writing, pouring his thoughts and experiences into poetry. Danielle embraced her community service work, becoming an advocate for mental health awareness. One evening, they gathered at the park, watching the sunset together. "Look how far we've come," Jake said, a hint of pride in his voice. "We survived the worst, and we're still here." Lily nodded, a smile breaking through her sadness. "We're stronger than we realized. And we have each other." In that moment, they understood that their past didn't define them. They were survivors, not just of a single night, but of the trials that had followed. As they looked toward the horizon, a sense of hope blossomed within them, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, they could find light together. As summer break drew to a close, Jake found himself sitting in his room, the glow of his laptop illuminating the dim space. The words flowed freely as he began to document their experiences, everything from the chaos of the ritual to the turmoil that followed. Writing had become his therapy, a way to process the emotions that had been bottled up for far too long. He glanced at a photo on his desk, a snapshot of the group taken just days before the trial. Their smiles seemed distant now, overshadowed by the events that had unfolded. "This is more than just a story," he murmured to himself. "It's a chance to raise awareness about mental health." The next day, Jake shared his manuscript with his friends. They gathered at Lily's house, the atmosphere charged with anticipation. "This isn't just about us," It's about others who might be struggling in silence, Jake said, his eyes shining with passion. Danielle nodded, her expression serious. If we can help even one person understand that they are not alone, it'll be worth it. The group began discussing ways to use Jake's writing as a tool for advocacy. They brainstormed ideas, each contributing their own experiences and insights. For the first time in a long time, they felt united in purpose. Inspired by their discussions, Danielle stepped up to lead a local mental health awareness group. She organized meetings and began inviting speakers to share their stories, creating a safe space for those affected by mental health issues. I want to help others find their voice, Danielle told her friends one evening. We were lucky to have each other, but not everyone has that support. Her passion ignited a spark within the community, and word spread quickly. People began to attend, sharing their struggles and healing together. As she spoke to the group, Danielle felt empowered, her confidence growing with each passing week. As the day of the awareness event approached, tensions began to rise among the group. Each member dealt with their own fears and doubts, creating an undercurrent of anxiety. I don't know if I can do this, Tom admitted one afternoon, pacing nervously. What if nobody cares? What if they blame us again? Jake placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. We're not here to seek forgiveness. We're here to share our truth. Despite their efforts to support each other, rifts began to form as they confronted their trauma head-on. Lily withdrew into herself, grappling with anxiety about the public's perception of her, while Danielle became increasingly focused on the event, pushing her friends to prepare. The night before the event, Jake and his friends gathered at Danielle's house for one final meeting. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken worries. Let's go around and share what we're feeling, Danielle suggested, her voice steady. Jake hesitated but eventually spoke up. I'm terrified. I feel like we're putting ourselves on display for everyone to judge us. I'm scared too, Lily admitted, her voice trembling. But we can't let fear control us anymore. As they shared their fears, a sense of solidarity emerged. They knew that they were in this together, no matter the outcome. The day of the event arrived, and the atmosphere was electric. The venue buzzed with community members eager to hear the stories of the group. Jake felt a mix of nerves and excitement as they prepared to take the stage. As Danielle stepped up to speak, her voice echoed through the crowd. We're here to share our truth, to break the stigma surrounding mental health, she said, her words powerful and clear. Emotions surged in the room as Jake, Lily, and Tom followed her lead, each sharing their experiences. The audience listened intently, and for a moment, the weight of their past felt lighter. Just as the event seemed to be unfolding smoothly, an unexpected confrontation arose. A man from the back of the room shouted, "You think you can just come here and play the victim? You're the ones who caused this mess." Gasps filled the audience, and the atmosphere shifted dramatically. Jake's heart raced as he recognized the man from their high school, a former classmate who had always harbored resentment toward them. Danielle stepped forward, her heart pounding. We're not here to play the victim. We're here to take responsibility and to help others understand what we've been through. But the man continued to shout, drawing attention and chaos. The tension in the room escalated, and the group felt the weight of their past actions come crashing down around them. In the face of the chaos, Jake, Danielle, Tom, and Lily found strength in one another. They stepped together, forming a united front against the hostility. Let's not let this man derail our message, Jake urged, his voice steady despite the turmoil. Together, they confronted the man, each sharing a piece of their truth. They spoke not just to him but to the crowd, reminding everyone of the importance of understanding and compassion. As the confrontation unfolded, the audience began to shift their focus, rallying behind the group. The collective energy turned from hostility to support as others stood up to share their own stories. The aftermath of the confrontation left the group shaken but resolute. As they gathered outside the venue, the night air felt charged with unspoken emotions. "I didn't expect that," Tom said, his voice shaking. "But maybe it was what we needed." Lily nodded, wiping away tears. "We faced our fears together. That's what matters." The event garnered media attention, highlighting not only their struggles but also the importance of mental health advocacy. They began to receive messages from people across the community, expressing gratitude for their courage in sharing their stories. In the weeks that followed, Jake, Danielle, Tom, and Lily found themselves on a path to closure. They participated in further discussions about mental health, connecting with others who had faced similar challenges. One evening, they gathered in Jake's backyard, the stars twinkling overhead. "We've come so far," Jake said, a sense of pride in his voice. "It feels like we're finally starting to heal." Together, Danielle added, smiling at her friends. "We couldn't have done it alone." As they sat in the quiet of the night, they realized that while the shadows of their past would always echo, they had the strength to move forward. The bonds they had forged through their struggles became a source of light, guiding them toward a brighter future.